Good morning to everyone from Cambridge. I know everyone is in quite a variety of different time zones across the globe, and that's what makes this particular panel on connectivity even more special. And this panel is organized jointly by Cambridge Central Asia Forum, together with CAREC Institute in Urumqi, but together with a number of other partners who have been behind this whole conference, the 4-day conference, which we are on the 4th day of. So another main partner is the GCRF Campus grant project together with the University of Kent, which also includes working with universities in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. So this has been an exciting sort of times in both positive and more challenging ways. However, the connectivity aspect is one of the key underlying issues in our meeting as well in our approach towards the region. So throughout the conference, we have explored historical connectivity, which is often forgotten, but also the social, economic, political, cultural aspects of connectivity, challenges it faces, and how we can look towards the future in trying to have connectivity which is meaningful to all those who are being connected, meaning people, institutions, the corporate side, the government side, civil society, all of that. So we have been exploring all those things. So within that light, this panel brings a very much more direct and in a material sense, the connectivity, real connectivity, how it can be achieved rather than this philosophical or which is of course important as well. But here we move towards looking at prospects and actual projects and plans regarding, and real data is what I'm trying to allude to here. We have Dr. Shakil Shah of CAREC Institute who's here, who introduced the notion of this panel already on the first day of the conference. Today, we are privileged to have Professor Peter Nolan and Dr. Iskander Abdullayev as co-chairs of this panel, whom I'll hand over to very shortly. Professor Peter Nolan, one of the most well-known economic thinkers, but beyond economics, how to think of political economy of this broader region, and has been thinking about these things for a very, very long time, and particularly his one of the most major contributions has been found. He is the founding director for Center for Development Studies in Cambridge University, which has been a platform for producing research and, more importantly, people and human capital that looks at issues of development in all possible contexts. Peter currently is director of China Center, which is based at Jesus College. He also has institutionally innovated program called China Executive Leadership Program, but he has also paid a keen attention to what's happening in what was former Soviet Union, what today we may call Silk Road connectivity. But anyway, the Peter CV, of course, is everyone to see, but his contributions and his relevance to be chairing this panel is extremely important to note. Then we have co-chairing with him Dr. Iskander Abdullayev, originally and currently in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Dr. Abdullayev is a specialist in engineering, originally by training, and he was trained, or he did his original education in Tashkent itself during the Soviet days, but since then he has a very broad set of trainings and contributions across the globe, from the United States to Germany to Europe to Japan and different places. His expertise in connectivity is quite directly practical in helping to put together projects which connect environmental issues, which connect social issues, but I think quite importantly, where we met in Tbilisi nearly 2 years ago at the knowledge sharing platform. I think that's an important aspect of our discussion today as well. So I'll hand over to Dr. Abdullayev to start today's discussion, and Peter Nolan will follow afterwards. Skandar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Saxena, Professor Nolan, Director Shakil Shah. It's my pleasure to open today's roundtable. We call it Research Roundtable, but I'm sure there will be a lot of exchange of free ideas. CAREC Institute is a knowledge arm of CAREC program. You know, this is the big program which includes 11 countries and supported by ADB and a few other international partners like World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, others. So our role as a knowledge arm is produce research, provide capacity building, and disseminate knowledge among member countries. So we work on these areas to really provide very good basics and basis for decision making. Therefore, today we will share some of our findings from our different research. My colleagues will deliver on few areas our results. What I would like to underline that CAREC program has 6 transport corridors. You know, the corridor 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, etc. The notion today by CAREC program and also by CAREC Institute is making these transport corridors more economic corridors. If you like, is really link and try to provide all opportunities member countries gain from these corridors, not only being a transit areas, but also having some economic activity. Moreover, as Dr. Saxena already mentioned, CAREC Institute values that the knowledge is also a very important part of this cooperation and connectivity. So we had indeed 2019 special session on knowledge corridors, and CAREC Institute promotes to bring different think tanks, researchers and research units together in order to also link region by knowledge. I think this is also very important. I'm sure my colleagues will mention it during their presentations. Some of important products which CAREC Institute produces on this topic are jointly with ADB, corridor performance monitoring and measurement, CPMM, so-called, very short. It actually provides a lot of highlight on how these corridors works. Where is the problems and what kind of problems we face while we trade, while we travel, while we exchange. So I think this is very good one. I say flagship, which CAREC Institute started recently joined, and we produced 11 CPMM issues, which really describes in detail how these corridors works, what are the problems. I think today some highlights you will receive. Second work, which also recently started, is FTA and FTAs. So trade agreements for CAREC region. We're trying to analyze the best options that CAREC region could promote in order to trade with each other with less bureaucracy, quickly, and also provide some protocols of partnership. So this is also one area where we focus, which is relevant to today's topic. Other area of focus, which also relevant to today's topic, I'm sure my colleague Hans Holzacker will mention it, is CRE, trying to analyze regional integration index, how it works. There's 6 indicators. I would say right away that CAREC region is not the best integrated region in the world, but I think there is some promises, some areas of development. So these are the flagship area where CAREC Institute works and produces regular outputs, which we happily sharing with our partners. I will also give, while this session goes, the links to it. And then also the new area which is emerging, I think all we know about the connectivity is digitalization, or very shortly, e-connectivity. So I think this is also a very interesting area, and some ideas will be today voiced out. I think that's very important area. It accelerated during the COVID-19 period, and we see that this kind of quicker, much better exchange of people, knowledge is underway. Even today's meeting, you see we are sitting in different places, e-connected and sharing our ideas. I think these are the areas where we work. Last piece of work, which maybe my colleague Dr. Samad may highlight, is about how things changed under COVID-19 in these all corridors. What is happening? What's now different? So I think these are the topics, areas, focuses which CAREC Institute works. Some of we will share today, not all because time limit. Moreover, I would say our partnership with Cambridge Central Asia Forum, which led by Dr. Saxena, is long. Not only he attended our meetings, but I myself learning maybe already last 1.5 years, attending regularly these meetings, learning a lot. My colleagues do the same, and then sometimes we exchange. And under leadership of our director, we try to really now make much more important steps for cooperation, because I would say Dr. Saxena is now member of CAREC Institute's new advisory council, and we are looking forward for his inputs about Central Asia, about connectivity, about all cooperation we can build up together with this center. All in all, I think we are well suited to start working more closely. Our institute is mainly institute which produce policy research, I think, which is also important. We are not fundamental research institute, which is different. So we're trying to do some things which will bring a change, and we are hopeful that Central Asia, with all these great resources of human, also natural resources, and a lot of, I would say, potential roads to link with all over the world, deserves to become a new space and new hot space to development. So we're looking forward for that, and today's discussion will help us. What are the niches, research areas we could develop further and work together? I stop here, and I would like to, with my pleasure, hand over to Professor Nolan. Thank you again.
Iskander, thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be co-hosting, honored to be co-hosting this session with you. The organizers of this session are to be, and the whole conference, are to be congratulated for the structure in general of this conference, but also in particular for this session. And the topic is a general one, corridors and connectivity, but the structure is extremely well designed and very interesting to cover different aspects of this very, very broad topic. So we have four very highly qualified speakers who span a whole range of expertises, both theoretical and also especially practical, with real world experience. So we're very fortunate to have them with us. I won't go through a detail of their CVs because they're both very extensive, all very extensive, and that will take up the whole of this time. But simply to say the structure will be as follows. We'll have four presentations. Dr. Hans Holzhacker of the CAREC Institute will focus on China-Europe corridors and BRI. It will be an understatement to say this is an important topic, one that if you mention the two words Europe, BRI, it is a very, very hot and important topic. So we're very grateful to him for introducing that topic to us, China-Europe corridors and the Belt and Road Initiative. Shahboz Ahmedov, also at the CAREC Institute, will be talking about connectivity and corridors within Central Asia, which is, as far as the West is concerned, is an empty black box. Most people in the West, if you ask them about Central Asia, say, yes, there's a train that we hope will go through it very fast. It used to go through on camels, but now it's going to be a train or maybe some high-speed trucks or a plane that flies overhead. So the understanding historically and in terms of the current development within Central Asia is extremely important and completely, I think, almost entirely misunderstood amongst the general public and educated people and less well-educated people in the West. So the question of the corridors within Central Asia is both historically very important and exceptionally interesting for us today. Then we turn to Adina Asgalieva from the ADB, and she's an economist by training, studied at Essex University in this country and with the ADB. And she's going to focus on the Caucasus, but her focus is on a topic that, again, most people outside the region would have no idea of, which is trans-Caspian corridors. Extremely important practically in terms of economics, in terms of international relations, and very, very strategically important. So that's the topic of Dina's presentation. And then to round off this extremely interesting session, Ghulam Samad, who worked for many years with the Pakistan planning institutions, very deep, rich practical experience, as well as very deep training in all issues related to economics, planning and development. Ghulam will talk about a different angle about Central Asia, South Asia. Again, much misapprehension in the West, but exceptionally important for all sorts of points of view, as you'll hear from Ghulam's presentation. So I won't say more to introduce the speakers because they give them time to make their presentations. So they will each make their presentation and then we'll hand over for Q&A with the audience. So first of all, Hans Holzhacker, over to you.
Hans, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I shared my screen, but I can't see it.
We can see your screen. That's not a problem. If you just want to project it or whatever you like.
Okay, give me 1 second. I see. Okay, slideshow. So should work, right?
Yeah.
So my name is Hans, and thank you organizers for organizing and having me here. And thank you moderators, and thank you participants for participating and listening and contributing. And as said, I will speak about China-Europe corridors and BRI. And let me start with my first slide. This basically only says that I can talk rubbish and the CAREC Institute and no one else is responsible. I will not go through it. It's just a disclaimer. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you is about this picture here. Can anyone remember who these guys are? So this is Jean-Claude Juncker and Li Qiang, Prime Minister of the PRC. So Jean-Claude Juncker was President of the European Commission from 2014 to 2019. And Donald Tusk was President of the European Council from 2014 to 2019. And in these early days of BRI and cooperation on BRI between China, several countries, and also the European Union. So there were all early hopes for a win-win situation, and I just wanted to remember you about this signing between the European Commission and the Chinese government of a member of understanding on the EU-China connectivity platform and to enhance synergies between China's, at that time still called One Belt, One Road, which is called now BRI, and EU's connectivity initiatives such as the Trans-European Transport Network Policy. And as I speak here for the CAREC Institute, I want to also mention that at the third China Central Asia Cooperation Forum in 2015, several, all the 5 Central Asian countries and China committed to jointly building the Silk Road economic belt. A few words about the Belt and Road initiative. It's symbolic for the People's Republic of China is going global. And Belt and Road initiative is a multifaceted initiative, but the economic roots of it and the basis for China going global is the development of the Chinese economy, and especially the Chinese growth of the Chinese companies. Also, you see here on the left side the Fortune 500 companies ranking, and you see China overtook the United States already by the number of companies which are listed in this Fortune 500. Among these large Chinese companies, there are many infrastructure state-owned enterprises, but there are also many other firms in many other sectors. So again, BRI is rooted in the development of the Chinese economy. As a result of the PRC's growth, the Euro-Asian continent has become largely East-West bipolar. I call it Euro-Asian and not Eurasian, because Eurasian became a bit of a name for a specific area. So I'm speaking about the whole continent. And if you look at this chart, so the red bars is China, the blue bars is the European Union still, or Europe still, including UK. And as you can see here, these two bars on the right-hand side, so in 2020, they dwarf countries such as India and Russia. So the continent has really become bipolar through the developments. And this, of course, has an impact on trade. I will not run you through the different products which are traded between the EU and China. However, what you can see here is that China is exporting double as much to the EU than the EU to China. So China roughly $450 billion in 2020 as compared to the EU 28 still to only 250, so just half of what China is exporting, and this has an impact on the corridors, of course, as well. I want to show you here the railway corridors and across the continent, and in the green cycle you can see here these are the 11 CAREC countries like Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, the PRC, Georgia, and so on, up to Uzbekistan. And the CAREC Institute is sitting in the middle of this whole, in Urumqi, in the middle of the continent, in the middle of the red lines. However, we of course don't control the flows. We're just sitting there. I showed you some railway connections. However, there are several land-based corridors under development, among them the CAREC corridors and also Traseca. So the colleagues will run you more in detail through these corridors. I just show you the picture just to show that there are several initiatives connecting the continent and again, so CAREC is sitting in a pretty strategic location here in the development of the CAREC corridors. The 6 corridors is highly important also for the overall trade and freight forwarding on the continent. However, one has to keep in mind that we have the trade between China and Europe is not only overland. There are very important Chinese harbor investments, as you can see. So these dots are the global Chinese investments in harbors here, and only roughly 5% of the trade between the EU and China are going overland. So far more is going by sea. However, rail traffic has increased, and at the same time also new routes open up and bringing new players in, and colleagues will tell you more about this. I have to mention these 2 charts are courtesy of the Eurasian Development Bank, and especially by a recent report by Evgeny Vinokurov. And what you can see, who studied these things quite in deep also, and what you can see here on the left-hand side, so on the right-hand side, you have the yellow line is a new interesting corridor now going from India to St. Petersburg, and therefore also an Asian-Europe corridor going via Azerbaijan along the Caspian Sea. So such things are under development as well. And on the left-hand side, you see that freight rates in the overland freight rates has declined slightly, while the sea freight rates, the red line, has increased dramatically recently because of COVID, especially because of COVID. And what you can see here is, I mentioned before that only 5% of traffic goes by overland. However, because of this increase in the maritime freight rates, you have quite an increase in rail traffic recently in overland traffic. I don't run you through this slide here, just to mention what the headline says, and in the text you have similar things here. You can later look at this more in detail, maybe. I think the presentations will be made available. As I mentioned, the China-Europe rail rates have fallen, but they are still subsidized, but subsidized by China especially. So, however, the subsidies are becoming less. Nevertheless, rates fall at the same time as volume rise and travel time is substantially reduced. So before we were speaking, before these initiatives like the Europe-China rail and the BRI and so on, before we were speaking about 30 days of delivery, now we speak more about 15 days of delivery. So substantial reduction of time. Coming back to my initial talk about BRI, which is of course important for the development of the relations, including investment, including trade. What we see currently, however, is some slowdown in the BRI, and maybe we can talk about this later a bit, because the Chinese investment actually face quite a lot of political and commercial risks in the Chinese questionnaires to Chinese companies. It's revealed that they fear especially political risks. However, there is also substantial commercial risks, and risk mitigation mechanisms will have to be developed better, both in favor for the Chinese companies as well as for the recipient countries. Just to mention also, the EU very recently unveiled its global gateway initiative. It's somehow called as an alternative to China's BRI. But it's already, there is of course a question whether this is really an alternative or not. So just looking at the sums, so BRI investment is already about $2 billion US dollars, not without problems as mentioned before, but nevertheless. And the plan of the Global Gateway Initiative speaks about 0.3 billion, so it's much less in terms of volumes, and also the financing and the mechanisms are not really fully developed yet. So up to now, it's maybe not really kind of does not really match the BRI, and the same can be said, by the way, by the US or Japanese initiatives. They have also such initiatives. So let me conclude with the 4 remarks. So as mentioned, with regard to the BRI, both for the PRC as well as for the recipient countries, is needed a better alignment often between the national development strategies of the recipient countries, and there is a need of a better elaborated risk mitigation mechanism. Remark to the EU, the EU could become a bit more ambitious for the Global Gateway program, I think, to really be a player here. Even so, it's also supporting TRASEC and so on, but more could be done probably. Looking at, I think colleagues will talk about MERS, this hard infrastructure is important, but as our CPMM shows, so the ADB CPMM over CI is also sharing now the work on it. So what you can see here in the CPMM is that speed and costs of traveling decreased. Wouldn't there be delays? but there are delays. So all in all, we have not really much increase in speed. Rail is a bit better than road, but however, soft infrastructure, digitalization, and so on is very important. For the countries between the PRC and the EU, I couldn't speak much about this here. Colleagues will maybe do more. But as Iskander also mentioned, like one has to view it like transit is good, economic corridors are better, so the countries in between should also use these corridors for develop their own economies. Thanks a lot. Happy to discuss.
Peter, your voice is not heard.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Holzhacker. And we'll press on through each of the discussions before we go over to Q&A. So next will be Shahboz Akhmetov from the CAREC Institute, and he'll be focusing on potentials for corridors within Central Asia. So over to you, Shahboz.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. How is it now?
Yep, it's coming through slowly. Yep, there you go.
Great. Thank you very much for inviting to this event, and I'm truly delighted to make small contribution to it, and I'm happy to engage into discussion on the topic. I will be presenting on the new potential economic corridors in Central Asia region, and while talking saying Central Asia, I mean the Central Asia 5 stans, so basically located in the region Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and I put as my presentation is based on the research, my joint research with Dr. Iskander Abdullayev, CAREC corridors increase connectivity and improve trade. So which was a contribution to the book by Dina Ashgalieva and Elena Kaluzhnova, Unlocking Transport Connectivity in the Trans-Caspian Corridor. Yeah, more details of the book certainly will be presented in the next presentation by Dr. Dina, while I'll be focusing more on our chapter. So this chapter is actually inspired by the fact that significant changes are taking place lately in the Central Asian region, and in terms of economic collaboration and trade relations, and both bilateral and multilateral formats. Driven by these all, in this chapter, we tried to provide overview of potential of new economic corridors in how the corridor can impact the lives of many, particularly in adjacent areas, and with focus on the Caspian Road in the role of opening a new corridor between two cities of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, Kizilurda and Uchkuruk cities, and how this might change or affect overall economic activities. As a particular aspect, this research also frames the potential benefits of increased knowledge and knowledge exchange in the region, and its impact on the economy of countries and wider region. Yeah, well, it's no secret that economic corridors contribute a substantial amount to GDP, particularly in the neighboring areas, and in countries involved in corridors. Corridors are explicit outcomes of regional economic cooperation and integration. So this is two actually reciprocal process, which actually, because thanks to better regional integration, more opportunities for new corridors might comes up, and also these corridors play a huge role in sustaining this integration and cooperation within the region. So we think that as cooperative engagements are unlocking in Central Asia, as mostly due to the political change in Uzbekistan in 2016, and mitigation of water tension. We all know that water problem has been the main bottleneck for many aspects of relationship between among Central Asian countries. And so more in the context of these changes, more opportunities, more favorable opportunities are for connectivity and for expanding trade relations are so revealing. This is why we try to look into those aspects of this changes. Well, the analysis in recent CAREC Inst reports slightly was also mentioned by Dr. Hans in the previous presentation, and also in reports of ADB, that despite investments by the CAREC program, so over 20 years, the region is still suffers. So the region is still at like performing at low integration level compared with other sub-regions, as you see that the Central Asian region is well below the Asian continent average. Well, this can be reasoned by different factors. So certainly they are linked with institutional, legislative, infrastructure and capacity deficiencies of the regional economy, and rigid regulatory systems, self-sufficiency policies in competing structures of the economies can be considered as major obstacles to developing more closer trade and opening up new to increase the connectivity and integration in the region. And of course, I mean, we have to also mention that the region's countries are also landlocked and have extensive missing links in railways, in roads, which also become the main bottleneck in integration in the region. As you see in this figure, it summarizes that a developing economic corridor might have a number of stages. Basically, maybe you are well aware of this, but all start from a basic transport road, can be railroad to car road, and so basically which becomes a hard infrastructure, and which it shapes into transport corridor. As more freight and as more people will move along the corridor, the soft infrastructure comes into play in order to maintain and to keep efficiency of the activities. When we talk about soft infrastructure, the software logistics and institutions. And efficient corridor operations will be further developed into more economic activities, which leads to eventually to more investments in the region, in the adjacent areas, and this is basically makes this road or connection as economic corridor as we call today, because there is no specific definition by economic corridor. Everybody defines it differently, so this basic understanding is like this in summarizing this figure. Besides increasing connectivity between two or more countries, in this case where we are focusing on Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, it is basically intensifying trade relations between them and impacting overall regional integration. Corridors can also bring kind of non-linear values that could be categorized as economic and maybe social spillovers, which can be economic benefits could spillover could include, for example, improved economic development of remote areas, and small business opportunities for people living in that area, and that would provide employment opportunities for them. And certainly, besides employment, there are more social benefits, which would include eased mobility of people from one to another point, and social infrastructures will appear, and quality of life in society will in general improve. In Central Asia today, thanks to within ADB's program, there are two corridors that are being developed. They are also very at nascent stage. One of them is ABEC, which is Almaty-Bishkek Economic Corridor. Is the first economic corridor, and there's a CAREC program, and this corridor connects the two big cities of Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan with relatively high economic activities concentrated mostly in services in the cities, in agriculture. The corridor aims to reduce travel times between the two cities by creating one joint competitive market for health, education, tourism, and other services. These all are to be reached by 2030, and so it is expected that to combine two dense two dense urban agglomerations like these two cities into one economic space, and there will be more engagement in economic activities between these two cities. And the next one is Shymkent Tashkent Khujand Economic Corridor. This is a latest initiative that ADB supports, and with practically similar approach to and expectations from ABEC. They are quite similar. The corridor targets these three cities and surrounding regions. As these three cities are located closer to each other, expectations are very high, and it should be very easy access to each other in while having economic activity. So, and another corridor we suggest is Uchkuduk-Kızılorda corridor. This is Kızılorda is located in the South Kazakhstan, and Uchkuduk is in the middle, in the north central Uzbekistan, which close to each other. There is not much hot infrastructure. There's certain difficulty. There is a road, car road for that, but it often doesn't work well. So it needs improvements. And why Uchkuduk we chose in our paper is that again. 2016 was a tipping point in regional integration, and we saw tons of opportunities for more trade in our relationship between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, particularly trade between them since then has tripled. And this corridor actually links the economically advanced zone of Uzbekistan, which is Navoiy, and with Kızılorda, and then toward the main roads to Europe and China through the Caspian. Next slide will show you the which corridors or connecting roads I'm talking about. So, and this basically connects corridors 1B, 2A, and 6A. This is a map basically of the network of the CAREC corridors. So as you see here in the middle, Uchkuduk is located in here. Is Kızılorda. So basically, Uchkuduk and Kızılorda, once disconnected, we think that located on the Caspian Road, this would actually intensify the road utilization of by increasing connectivity and trade. I mean, the Caspian Road's utilization eventually. There are many other more reasons why we suggest this, because I mean there's also a favorable political environment. In 2020, in November 2020, two deputy prime ministers of two countries met to discuss exactly this corridor, and that was a surprise to us as well. And they agreed to open up international bus service in high-speed railway between particularly these two cities. And we think that once this is constructed, actually this could reduce a lot of road congestion, mitigate delays, and increase road safety through the Tashkent region. So because the main roads, railway and freights go usually now through Tashkent, which is the eastern part of Uzbekistan, and that could really help to speed up the logistics through the middle of the country. And Navoiy Free Economic Zone is granted a special legal regime, including taxation, currency exchange, customs regimes, with connecting roads to all the big cities, such as Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, which are touristic spots of Central Asia. And this also located in the proximity to the international airport, E40 highway, and railway lines of global significance. So we see that there's excellent prospects for that, I mean, particularly in connecting these two cities. As a kind of, I think the sector which would really enjoy from this, certainly this is tourism, because as we know that both countries are focusing more on developing touristic potential, and both Kızılorda is one of the touristic cities of Kazakhstan, and all tourists coming through the Kızılorda could directly go to the other historical places of Uzbekistan, for example. So basically, it was Bukhara, Samarkand, Khiva, because they are located in close by, and this would really give the opportunity to to visit on the couple of cities on the one travel. And beyond that, we know that Silk Road visa to be introduced soon. This is being still discussed, and almost I think the first two countries have almost agreed. So again, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and certainly they want to include more countries yet, in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan as next. And as I said, I mean, this helps to make a touristic and logistical shortcut to the main historical place of the country. Sorry. And one more aspect that we focused on in our paper, that is the knowledge part. So as we know that the COVID pandemic has changed the way the world works, which has made planning for the future a kind of question of vital importance. And this planning can only be realized with available data, knowledge, and information. This is when we talk about the corridors, we often leave this part to knowledge connection, because knowledge corridor, by knowledge corridor, we mean that it's an interconnected web with virtual destinations, thoughts and ideas of different knowledge stakeholders, including government, sector experts, and research entities, and business sector representatives. The idea is to harness this potential and develop the directional frameworks and translate knowledge into tangible games, to basically bring the business into this play. And the role of knowledge corridor, beyond that, in the regional economic cooperation platforms is critical as corridor hard infrastructure corridor gets sustained through standardized and systematic approach as trade involves regional transport, trade, energy, and tourism development across this corridor. And this is why it's very important. The role of knowledge comes again as a vital importance of for this corridor. One of the ideas, again, the central idea of knowledge corridor is to make knowledge a profitable commodity, or convert data to dollars. In this regard, there are some actions that the involvement of governments have been observed. For example, the CAREC Pakistan area, the RLC area of Uzbekistan has been announced as an innovation hub, and that's still in the process, and that's gathering many stakeholders to actually provide real-time data and information on the RLC, what's exactly happening, to avoid the further potential impact of this degradation. And think tanks very instrumental in the knowledge exchange like this, what we are having today, and which would help certainly governments make more informed policy decisions. And we are trying to always to cooperate with universities, and universities can diversify their research portfolios by adding to the curriculum topics in them in which businesses have shown interest. That's also brings, I mean, that's one of the ideas of this ecological innovation hub in CAREC, Pakistan. And certainly cooperation with developer partners, very essential to generate and sharing knowledge, linking actors in mobilizing necessary technical and expertise in financial support. These as basic ideas actually have been presented in this chapter 2 of the book, and certainly any further comments and questions will be welcome. As last point, I want to say that we authors, actually, Dr. Scanlon and myself, intend to provide some thoughts actually regarding unlocking the potential of new corridors in the potential of intensive knowledge activities, knowledge exchange in this region that would really serve the better development of these two countries. And but of course, there are, as mentioned here on this screen, there are some challenges as well that have to be surmounted. The first, absence of hard infrastructure, existing soft infrastructure, weak cross-border coordination, and limited private and human capital that are as key challenges in realizing these all ideas and in this region. Basically, that's it. Yeah, if any comments and questions, please welcome, and thank you very much. Look forward to.
Thank you, Shahbaz, very much indeed. And we'll move on to the next presentation, and that's from Dina Ashgalieva, and she will focus on the Caucasus and the potential for trans-Caspian corridors. Over to you, Dina.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yeah, I'll try to be short so we have more time for Q&A. I'm very glad to be back in Cambridge, and virtually yeah, but I still feel like I'm there. The book which Shahboz just talked, this is it's here, published just 2 months or 1 month ago, Unlocking Trans-Caspian Connectivity in the Trans-Caspian Corridor. I believe this is the first book on Trans-Caspian Corridor. So if you have your smartphone, feel free to put your camera on, and that will take you to this link. But don't worry, I will also send these links in chat box so you can access. So the great news that this book is published by ADBI and it's absolutely free. It was done with a great cooperation with CAREC Institute and the Center for Euro-Asian Studies from Reading University. Okay, so what this book about? It consists of 3 parts. First one is like introduction, what is Trans-Caspian Corridor, why do we need it? Then second, more about policy development, drivers and barriers. And the third one is about measuring impact of the corridors. So why is it important to measure impacts? You know that Central Asia, many of you probably have been, or you are from Central Asia, I'm from Central Asia. You know that what we are struggling with investing in infrastructure is that low population density plus vast distances. So together these 2 issues causing a big problem for attracting investment in infrastructure, because low population distances, vast distances. So together that's requires enormous amount of investments, while population density is low, means less people can use it. So you can compare with like how easy for you to get from Cambridge to London, or like from me from Tokyo to another city. It's so easy. You don't need to book ticket. You can, but you don't have to. You just jump on a train, and train, you don't need to check even schedule, because train leaves every like 20 minutes. While in Central Asia, because of these problems, trains are not so often. You need to book 1 month in advance, and you need to definitely you need to check a schedule before going to train station. So what is the solution to? Okay, we got this problem. So what is the solution? Connectivity is the solution to this problem. Why is that? Because if railway or road and seaports are well connecting across countries, what we call corridor, then that infrastructure can be used not only by locals in that one country, but by several countries. And then attracting investments in infrastructure would be easier, because many countries will benefit. And also this will be enormous benefit to locals, because locals will get that railway or road which they didn't have before, and they can enjoy it too. So the main objective of infrastructure is to provide as much as possible such spillover effect benefits, like increase in output, production, employment, new businesses, more trade, and so on. So quality of life of local people will also increase. Why do we need to provide measures? Because these measures, either empirical methods or simulation exercise, they provide quantitative measures of infrastructure impact and can provide policy recommendations of how to make these impacts higher and greater and more beneficial for people. So several papers here presented measuring impacts. So to save time, I would just shortly cover a few. For example, this one compares corridors, which I think Hans mentioned them, 6 corridors. And he showed the same map. And this paper compares what will be impact on GDP per capita in each country. So you can see Caucasus, for example, Armenia, Georgia, yeah, and Central Asia countries. The impact from different corridor is different. Like this is vertical axis showing GDP percent change, increase. So definitely, of course, it has a positive impact. There is no negative impact, but positive impact varies from smaller to greater, and the greater impact, of course, we want a greater impact. And you can see each corridor has different impact on different countries. Some countries can benefit more, some less. Yeah, look at, see, for example, corridor 1, here's Armenia is high, and Kazakhstan is high, and corridor 2 also, yeah, and so on. Okay. Next paper shows again impact of infrastructure on containers traveling from People's Republic of China to Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Iran, and Turkey. And it shows that S1, so this one you can see S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. S means simulation of the policy, different policies. So from S1 is like a mild policy, mild improvements. And then S5 is like enormous, very large improvements. Means that big policy implementations, for example, improvement in like cross-border barriers, increased railway service, let's say, and so on. So if you can see, the more supportive become policy for trade, then country benefit more. And you can see, especially here, we can notice Azerbaijan and Iran, right, and Georgia. You can see they increased, and also Turkey as well here in S5. Yeah, so countries definitely can trade can benefit from improvement in like border trade, especially like barriers from border barriers, like how long it takes to cross the border for goods, to get clearance from customs, especially that many goods are excluded from paying, you know, because they are passing, they are not they're not importing, they are just passing. So there is an agreement between countries. So how fast we can go from, like, goods can travel quickly between countries, and also construction. If they go slow, especially it's difficult for perishable goods, you know, like if it's slow, and also like safety of goods. If it goes slow, it also affects the safety, the quality, and also it affects businesses, because let's say if they borrow money to do this business, to sell goods, then they want to pay back this loan, so they want to be delivered faster. So that adds cost. It's not just time, it adds cost to do business. And another paper we did, the one I wrote, impact on firms, how firms are affected by infrastructure. What's interesting that, of course, Central Asia, like having so many similarities, like language, food, culture, and so on. But in terms of infrastructure, we can see that there is big differences in infrastructure among countries. So you can see this, for example, from Caucasus, you can see Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Georgia. Average power duration outages, so the quality of power, you can see it's lots of power outages in Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, for example. Access to internet, you can also see varies quite drastically between countries. The highest share of businesses reported to have internet, it's in Kazakhstan. So this is based on the Business Enterprise Survey by World Bank. What companies reported. This is not national statistics. This is what businesses report themselves. And also like electricity expenses, you can see as well, the cost quite different. And the custom also, you can see it's different. And what's interesting that customs quality is quite low in many countries. Yeah, and yeah, so I will not go through methodology, I will just skip it. So going to results, we found that efficient policies like infrastructure need to be more targeted to the firm size. So firm size, small, medium, large, they are affected differently. They have different needs in infrastructure. For example, customs quality, more beneficial to medium and large companies, not so much for small. Electricity expenses, most important for small companies, not so much for medium and large. And internet is important for all companies. So policy can be to make policies targeted. You know, like now during COVID-19, public expenditure very constrained, public revenue is also constrained. So policies need to be targeted in order to make them cost effective. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Dina, thank you very much indeed. And now we turn for our final presentation to Gulav Samad, who also is at the CAREC Institute. and he's going to focus on the north-south aspect of things, Central Asia and the South Asia corridor. So over to you, Ghulam.
Sorry, Peter, would you allow me for a screen sharing?
Okay, I'll sort it out just 1 second. I think you logged out and came back in, so you lost it.
Well, I can share my screen.
Yeah, you can now. Yeah.
Okay, it's here now. Thank you so much. Just to confirm, Peter, can you see it now?
Yes, now can. It's fine. Thanks, Ghulam. Fine.
Okay, great. So, colleagues, I will here focus on the Pakistan trade with Central Asia, and as mentioned by earlier colleagues, that I think for a transfer corridor, I think is more important that we should have a more economic corridors. So here in this presentation, I will not discuss the overall South Asia perspective, trade perspective, but I will focus more on Pakistan trade potential with Central Asia. So next slide here. So the sequence of my presentation would be broadly, I will discuss the situation analysis, where I will discuss the Pakistan structure of exports, and then I will walk you through the Pakistan exports and import performances. And then broadly, like this will develop the stage for where Pakistan is standing in terms of trade connectivity with Central Asia. And then before concluding, I will discuss the Pakistan selective trade indicators. And I do believe discussing these trade indicators will bring, will show us the trade perspectives of Pakistan with Central Asia. So here for the situation analysis, let me quickly walk you through the basis of the Pakistan exports, especially for the manufacturing exports. On the left side, you guys can see the world, where the world has been standing. The HT is for the high technology, MT is for the medium technology, LT is for the low technology, RB is for the resource based. And on the right side, we can see where Pakistan has been standing. So clearly, we can see the Pakistan's focus here is more on the low technology basis, that is almost 87%. On the left side, the transition in the world is from the low technology basis toward the high technology basis. So this is the first fundamental thing that we can currently see even today in Pakistan's export, that more or less largely we are relying on the low technology basis. Similarly, here you guys can see Pakistan export by technology categories. And again, the momentum or the trajectory of the Pakistan's, I would say since 1980s, is more focusing on the low technologies. So the transition from the low technology toward the high technologies, that link has been missing. Again here, these are some of the fundamentals, broader indicators which position us like where we are standing in South Asia and compared to the other regional economies. And I don't walk you through all these indicators, but if you guys can focus on the last column, where I discuss the share of the medium and high technologies goods manufacturing. So tremendously here we can see for the larger economies, the share has been larger. But for Pakistan, even though the data is old, but the difference in the last 1 decade has not been too much there. It almost around 10 to 20%. So that this significant shares is contribution in the manufacturing or the export is very important, and we do need to consider this while we are looking for the for the significance of the economic corridors in terms of developing the transport corridors. So here, this is the world transition. The role of technology has been placing here, and clearly the pink line here we can see the role of the high technologies in worldwide export has been increasing. However, the role of the low technologies, the medium technologies has been on the transition sides. So these clearly show us that where Pakistan has been structurally when we discuss the trade performances of Pakistan's. So here, let me quickly discuss the export and the import performances of Pakistan. So here on the left side, you guys can see mainly we relying more on the textile groups. Significant amounts in our total exports has been from the textile groups and followed by the food groups. But one thing that is more important for today's discussion, that is about the regional connectivity. Here the two pies for the two decades, and clearly we can see the exposed destinations of Pakistan's. Mainly the majorities of our exports goes to USA, followed by UK and the rest of the other economies. In one decade, if you can see the lower pie chart, this significant differences has been still in terms of export destination are there. So the diversification in export in Pakistan's economies is not been there, and that is one of the reasons why I developed this position paper, that I wanted to highlight where Pakistan is standing in terms of their market diversification. And unfortunately, the Central Asia connectivity is more important to bring in more diversification for the markets and for the products as well. Again here, for the import performance, we again can see on the left side the products that are mainly contributing to Pakistan's imports. And I think the top one in last 1 decade, the range has been varying, but machinery and petroleum group, these are the two dominant contributor to Pakistan's imports. But on the right side, again, if we can see the import destinations of Pakistan, so again, we can see the similar pictures in almost 1 decade. Slightly the improvements, the transition in a country like for China, it's been increased from 11% to 20%. Two main reasons. The one, we already signed in 2005, I believe, FTA with China. And then we reshape and improve further the next phase of those FTA. And of course, the current CPEC engagement with China is again the significant contribution that we can discuss here, in increase in China's imports from 11% to almost 20%, that mainly comes in machinery related products. So now here we can see the Pakistan overall trade with Central Asia. And one thing that I want to highlight here is that if you guys can see, the amount is so minimal. I think the highest figure we do have here for Afghanistan, that is roughly about $1.8 billion. That is significantly low. The estimation showing us that it's been more than $10 billion if the geopolitical situations become normal. However, for the rest of the Central Asian economies, except Kazakhstan, that is about $0.9 billion, majorities of Pakistan's export trade volume is positive but very minimal. So these are some of the indicators that I wanted to highlight to show the Pakistan trade prospects with the Central Asia. There's a lot of discussion currently, and government of Pakistan, Central Asia government, they're taking very seriously. Pakistan is entering to developing a preferential or FTAs, bilateral FTAs, and also currently the CAREC Institute and the ADB jointly, we are working on the CAREC wide FTA agreement as well. So this position paper brings in some aspects that need to be highlighted before we are going for finalization of FTA or RTAs kind of arrangement. So here for the RCA, for the majorities of the countries that I included on the first column here, we can see the different range of RCA. And the positive thing is here that most of these RCAs are greater than 1. But the important point here that I want to focus on the last column. If you compare 2006 with 2016, the variation is very important. And unfortunately, the variation of the new products, they need to be more in this whole analysis is significantly low for most of these countries, except Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, but still these numbers are very new products with the rest of the regional economies. Again, the bilateral trade complementarity indices give us a picture that where the exports and the imports of a countries basically are based. If for example, Pakistan export, whether those will be consumed as the imports of the Central Asian economies or not. Again, those different indices has been there. Unfortunately, these numbers or indices are very low if we compare Pakistan trade complementarity with the Central Asian economies. And the reason has been obvious. Most of these economies, the big economies in Central Asia, they are agro-based, and of course they are more relying with the minerals and petroleum related stuff as well. So clearly the trade complementarity indices shows us that the ratios are low. So here the last indices that I need to bring in like more clarity, where I think the commodities diversification or concentration in the market diversification and concentration are very important. So I bring this export similarity indices to see again where Pakistan is standing with the rest of the Central Asian economies. And again, a little bit more good picture we got for Kyrgyzstan, but still, if we compare with the regional economies, unfortunately, these numbers are significantly low. So let me quickly conclude here that the analysis in this paper I developed has been accepted for an Oxford publication. I think the most important thing here is that the trade potential of Pakistan with Central Asia does exist. However, so far the analysis shows that the trade volume is significantly minimal. If we look into the export similarity index, that definition I already mentioned is less than 1. And unfortunately, for Pakistan since 2000, this ratio has been decreasing rather than going towards the increasing sides that should favor the trade balance between the South Asia and Central Asia, or between Pakistan and Central Asian economies. Similarly, if we look into the trade intensity index, is again I mentioned earlier, for most of these economies, the ratio is low. So that the overall trade volume of Pakistan in early 90s was promising, but as I mentioned earlier, that the data shows that the Pakistan trade volume has been tremendously decreasing with Central Asian economies, and this is one of the reasons that been seriously considered the government of Pakistan, that they are now exploring again the reasons for tapping the Central Asian and the African markets. So here, the last slide, as I mentioned, the FTA's agreement, the bilateral FTA is under consideration, but before going for FTA, Pakistan is seriously considering improvements in trade-related issues, and recently we do have a very good exchanges with Uzbekistan as well. But unfortunately, so far the analysis shows that we need to be very, I would say, cautious while we go for FTAs, unless and until we develop the structure of the Pakistan's economies. My second suggestion, conclusion is that the Central Asian economies is unexplored yet. A lot of potential does exist for Pakistan to develop the concentration of the exports market, as well as the commodity diversification for the exports markets that are unfortunately concentrated to the few economies historically that I already mentioned in my last 2 pies. And I had a discussion with the business community in Pakistan. Unfortunately, with unknown reason, a majority of business community, they are preferring the already mentioned country rather than diversifying their markets with unknown reason. Though there are some non-tariff measurement issues are still there. If the questions comes in, then definitely I'll walk you through. But those kinds of issues are there. And unfortunately, the business communities are still reluctant because the connectivity between the Pakistan, the air connectivity kind of thing has been again decreasing. So the importance for tapping the Central Asian economies is recognized in Pakistan. Pakistan is really looking forward to tap the Central Asian economies. The last point here is that we can definitely get access to the Eurasian economic union countries. We can definitely get energy cooperation with energy surplus Central Asia. And of course, the one of the biggest challenge Central Asian economies they are facing, they are landlocked. And Pakistan can provide direct sea access to these landlocked countries. So these are some of my analysis, and I stop here, Peter, and looking forward for the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Ghulam. Well, we've got 4 presentations looking at things from 4 different but interconnected aspects. So now, Montu, I will hand over to you to coordinate the questions, and then we'll have some discussion. So Montu, over to you.
Peter, I think perhaps are there any questions from the room for the moment? Yes. So we have first question from here in Cambridge. One of our MPhil students, please introduce yourself and ask the question. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yes. Hi, I'm Andy. Thank you for your talks. In relation to what was being said about Central Asian, South Asian potential for our economies, what challenges do mountain ranges such as the Hindu Kush and Pavia Mountains pose for greater connectivity and trade between South Asia and Central Asia? Thank you.
So this is directed at particularly
Ghulam, is it?
Okay. Yeah. So the question for the last speaker, Ghulam, please.
Also, just quickly, let me fix my microphone. And unfortunately, I lost the question. I did not hear it clearly. If you want, would you mind to remind the question again?
No problem. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah.
Louder.
My apologies. My apologies.
That's okay. So in relation to Central Asian and South Asian trade and the potential to their economies, what challenges do the mountain ranges such as the Hindu Kush and Pavia Mountains actually pose for greater connectivity and trade?
Sam, there was echo in the voice. Unfortunately, I did not hear it clearly.
The question, can you hear me better?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yeah. Okay. So the key question is the geographical challenge of Hindu Kush and other mountain ranges, which sort of interrupt between the flows between Pakistan and Central Asia, which perhaps directs towards infrastructure development to overcome those.
So much. Yeah, definitely the geographical challenges that you mentioned is out there. But along with that, I think the non-tariff measurement issues are significantly very important there. Let me give you an example. I recently had a discussion with the business community, and one issue that has been highlighted to us by the business community, if you want to do a trade with the Uzbekistan, for example, in any country in Central Asia, as an exporter, you need to open the letter of credit, LC. But one of the conditions, if you can only open the LC if you have a direct air connectivity with those specific countries. So unfortunately, Pakistan has a very limited air connectivity with most of the Central Asian economies. So that was one of the example that I think is very important before we go for the trade, the transport kind of a corridors or the geographic kind of a consideration that you mentioned. So definitely, I buy your question in terms of if we can develop a trade via Afghanistan with Central Asian economies. That is again a biggest challenge for a Pakistan economy, especially if we can see the geopolitical situation that has been around in this region for a while now. So I do understand, but I think the importance of the economic corridors or the trade corridors in terms of looking forward for the NTMs, I think that are more important currently. As we go along, definitely once we develop all those kind of a mechanism where we have been standing like in a good position, those things need to be considered. So I think I hope I understand your question, Saxena. Is it okay?
Thank you. Yes, yeah. This is from one of our students who had asked. Jakub, can you come forward because I think it's not clear to them to hear. So we have a second question here again from the room from one of our PhD students.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for this very interesting panel. I'm Jakub, I'm Dr. Saxena's PhD student. I have a question on Dr. Asgalieva. And my question is, I haven't had a chance to look in detail about the book. It looks interesting. I'm just wondering if you were thinking of kind of zooming a little down in the countries and in terms of the socio-economic impact, because, for example, one of the indicators you've mentioned is GDP per capita. But then, so what the logic is that, for example, I saw the highway, I mean, parts of it are already built between the north and south in Azerbaijan, and it actually helps people to, I mean, within the country connectivity. And but it's not finished, and I'm wondering, for example, then the rail. It's great if the goods can like rush through the country. I mean, through Azerbaijan from Iran to Russia, but then I don't know, farmers cannot really get their tomatoes to Russia through the border just across. I mean, so I was wondering if you have been looking at the kind of more local impact of this, what the economic corridors can have in terms of employment, the socio-economic impact. I'm not going to ask about the environmental and other stuff because that wasn't the focus of your book, anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakob, very much for your great question. Yeah, so the whole objective of the book was to demonstrate the impact of infrastructure and where the need for improvement. Yeah, so they like it was open call for papers. Anyone can contribute to the book, and then it was very transparent, and scientific committee was selecting the papers for quality and relevance. It was very difficult to find relevant papers for this book, so, and especially quantitative. So what we had sufficient quality and relevant, we took them all. And actually 2 papers were written by academia from Japan. I was surprised that they are very interested in Central Asia. Actually, they are from Japan. And they did simulation of used quantitative modeling, simulation on the impact. So they selected like one of the dependent variables was like GDP per capita, employment, and trade. So macroeconomic. Why they did it? Because they told me that the main challenge they faced was the data, lack of data. And they asked me like, Dina, if you can help us get us data, we can give you better results, we can do more things, but if limit. So I shared with them whatever I could get, but also because they need it for many countries. If it was just from my country, of course, I know more data from my country, but because they need it from across all these countries, same data, comparable, right? And like GDP is employment, trade, those data are quite comparable. So then you can put them in the same model. While not every data can be put in the model and be comparable, right? So this data limitations, definitely your suggestion is great to see more local impact. And that for this kind of study, maybe more like survey. So if you can actually go to travel to, let's say, Azerbaijan and talk to business people and households and ask them, so then you can get more like local impact. Yeah. Thank you very much for your suggestion. I'll consider it for future.
Thank you, Dina. We have this comment from me, I'll use to add to that. One of, for example, in Azerbaijan's case, and we have other Azeri colleagues here who can maybe add to that later. One of the big stories for at least 10 or 12 years I've followed is that train link within the country. This is kind of discussing what Jakub said between Gabala and Baku, or more importantly, between Gabala and port of Baku. So we have two things there. Gabala is a strong agricultural producing area. It's not able to get things out in an efficient way. And that's first to the big market within the country of Baku and its neighboring satellite cities, and further on to the port for more international transit. And most of the analysis that we saw was that the train links were often ruled out because they were considering people traffic as opposed to goods and other forms of container traffic. So these are kind of things that would be very interesting to dig into, not just the socioeconomic part in the sense, but also kind of analysis that are used to make certain decisions about local infrastructure is a topic that we are quite interested in. Yeah, and then eventually larger corridors. Anyway, we have a real question from David Hardy. David, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Montu. David Hardy, Chairman of the British Kazakh Society Education Group. First of all, thank you to everyone for some excellent presentations, some fascinating insights into what's really going on with the development of these various corridors and routes. Speakers have mentioned a lack of private capital, a lack of human capital across parts of Central Asia, and perhaps aimed initially at Dr. Holzacker. I wonder how those countries, those Central Asian republics, can capitalize on the opportunities created by these new developments and not just take transit fees.
I answer?
Yes, please answer. Yeah.
Yes. So I think this is a pretty complicated questions with several layers of answers. And the one layer is just logistics. So it's not enough that you have some trains going through, but you need like a local infrastructure as well, both like for multimodal transport, but also for organization. For example, in Kazakhstan, I know it's quite easy for the big grain producers to get access, and they have kind of standard access to the rail. But if you are small and a small business, it's not as easy as for these large companies, also because in part they own the wagons themselves and so on. So it's not so again you need, one thing is just to develop the local infrastructure so trains would not just pass by. So far the logistics. The even more complicated question is of course that you have to produce things which you can export, and I think Dr. Samad also showed for Pakistan, you have not enough diversification, and of course, in case of Kazakhstan, a lot depends on oil, for example, which would go by pipelines in part or by ship. So the much more complicated question is how to use this transport connectivity to actually increase the export with appropriate goods. And for this, you need first, right now we have decarbonization, so it's a special issue. And you need, of course, to have requalifications, reorganizing of jobs, reorganizing of the whole economic structure. And yes, you are right. You have to involve the private sector, and on top, I think the cooperation in the region is not so much just to fit each other or complement each other, but you have to develop the region in the sense that it can export to the continent as a whole. So you would need, for example, joint brands for like in agriculture, for example. And there you have also again logistics problems in part. You need to have the cold chains to export Tajik nuts via Kazakhstan to somewhere. Okay, I stop here.
Thank you. And, our next question is from Caroline, of our MPhil student with real-world experience. Caroline.
Firstly, thank you so much to all the panelists for a wonderful discussion. My question is also directed primarily to Hans regarding the BRI program. You mentioned one of your key conclusions being the need to improve risk mitigation mechanisms around these projects. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on how you see that being solved through risk allocation. Is it kind of more risk being assumed by private sector, more risk being assumed by national governments, more risk being assumed by multilateral organizations, kind of who you see needing to step up to sort of spearhead the improvement in in the risk matrix there. Thank you.
Yeah. This would also require a long answer, but
a long question. I know it's a big question. I apologize.
Let me. I mean, the short answer to this, I think the BRI is a not even BRI. So China going global is pretty new. I mean, they started like, I don't know, 2013 or so in earnest. So I think part of this is just the companies getting used to usual international risk mitigation procedures and instruments and so on. On the government level, in part, you have similar things like you have not, so far I know, the PSC is not a member of the Paris Club, for example, so you don't have the usual renegotiation instruments in place. So I think in part it's just to get used to the usual international risk mitigation mechanisms. That's all for
that's
as I can do.
Okay, we can come back to it if necessary. Carol, do you want to follow up?
And I guess the one quick follow-up that I would have would be, do you, I guess, how you see that differing between obviously the involvement of China in the region and then the potential for something coming from the European side as well, given the expectations that European private companies have and kind of the different relationship that they have with the state coming from the European perspective, and sort of their expectations and standards, and whether that makes the market more or less accessible for European companies compared to Chinese companies, which, as you pointed out, don't maybe have the international experience, but do have, in many cases, much stronger support from the state.
Well, first a comment on the current state, at least for Central Asia. I mean, maybe for Pakistan, Dr. Samad, because you have special situations there with the Chinese-Pakistan corridor, which is more developed. But for Central Asia, one has to keep in mind you have important Chinese investments there, but China is not the largest investor. And so the largest in part in terms of oil, like you have Chevron in Kazakhstan, which is so it's going via Netherlands. So Europe actually, at least on paper, is a much larger investor in Central Asia already than China. This is one thing. I mean, in terms of trade, so Russia and China is important on the import side, and China is in general on all sides. The importance of China is increasing on all sides in terms of trade, but still Russia is also an important player. And on the export side, for example, again, a lot of oil is going to Europe. So it's not that Europe does not play a role in the region.
Great, thank you so much. We have one question from the room, and then we will go to Abbas after that. Okay, Abbas, you can go ahead first. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena, and thank you, presenters, for insightful presentation. My question is to Mr. Shahboz Ahmedov, who introduced us the concept of knowledge corridors, which is a very new concept for me. So the question is about human capital aspect of it. So what should countries do in terms of education policies in order to become more competitive and become potential knowledge hubs across knowledge corridors?
Abbas, introduce yourself as well so we can have
I'm from Azerbaijan, Ege University, early career researcher.
Thank you very much, Abbas, Mr. Babayev, and it's also a tough question, I have to admit. There is no concrete recipe for that, right? While we were writing this research and also touching upon the knowledge aspect of the corridors, we actually were thinking about for example, about the RLC area. We know that, I mean, until today, everything most of the things that have been researched about the RLC and its occasion and the results and the impact measures and everything, this this old information data very how to say got old already and outdated to a certain level, and it's really hard to find out new data and what's exactly happening in that area, for example, to make analysis and to make more research on that into how to tackle this RLC problem. And for that, for example, we were thinking that actually this could be knowledge exchange and bringing different stakeholders into the table and making knowledge more profitable. It would be maybe a nice step in. Some initiatives are going on about, again, the RLC investigating that now currently in the discussion. For example, the construction of RLC observatory that would provide lifetime data and information what's exactly happening, and based on that, one could really see how to make intervention to mitigate that, at least the impact of this problem, and plus open up new opportunities for the involvement of business maybe or other stakeholders into this particular RLC problem. And regarding human capital development, of course, we have seen throughout this last 2 years of COVID years that the exchange of data information is so much important, and the more cooperation is needed on that, in particular between and among different think tanks and knowledge generators, and that's while we were thinking, besides connecting through hard infrastructure, so through roads, you also have to maybe connect and think about how to make a knowledge connection between these two cities, or between overall, between countries through different economic corridors. So this way we could also exchange the overall information about the problems that have transnational implications, like RLC disaster again, and so that we could, you could have different insights from both sides. And that could be also joining forces in tackling this matter more effectively. I hope I could answer your question, Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmedov.
Iskandar, you wanted to make a comment on this?
Maybe very brief. First of all, I think you're absolutely right. The region is not only economically less integrated, but also educationally. Part of the region, actually, we have been a part of Soviet Union, and then you had quite an intensive exchange of the students. Your student from Azerbaijan could study somewhere in Almaty and vice versa. It's happening also today, but there is no specific target. And lately, I think we got a lot of support from US and Europe, and you have Maskis exchange program, which supports students from Central Asia going and studying in Europe, and also other programs which supports the US. But there is no exchange programs among best universities in Central Asia. It's actually very interesting. This is also one of the reasons you may know in German Water Initiative have set up German Kazakh University in Almaty, where you have a specific program which brings Central Asian students together to study the same topic in one university. Actually, the impact is very interesting. I think this kind of initiatives are very interesting to see, try to set up knowledge centers and exchange among CAREC countries or member countries of the CAREC program, that they learn and mutually visit. Second one is, of course, mutual recognition of diplomas. It's the biggest problem. People are coming back from, for example, studying some of member countries back to their countries, and they face a lot of problems. Diplomas are not recognized, and training programs are different. This also puts a lot of serious barrier to build up effective educational, for example. And then last but not least, articles or research. There's now a single journal which really targets Central Asia, and a lot of people are publishing in different languages, in different areas, all focusing and scattered around. And maybe it's a good time also to think about putting such journals together that people can publish jointly, discussion forum, because all Central Asian discussion forums, I respect all of them, are outside of the region, and there is no any internal space for the dialogue and discussion. Maybe also political reasons, but I think also technical reasons. Last but not least, 30 years, huge projects have been implemented in Central Asia, huge knowledge have been generated, but meanwhile time passes, you don't have access to knowledge. It's lost. Actually, it's somewhere, someone's computer. So next one is really making such access to knowledge generated in the region. We try to do something with our knowledge partner e-learning platform at CAREC Institute, just putting first steps. But I'm sure there is a much more demand to create a knowledge platforms which make access all knowledge available, at least part, for which we have spent budget and money. Sorry for a long intervention.
That's right. Thank you. The question from the room.
Thank you for the talks. They were really interesting. Michael, I have two questions. One question is that Iskandar already mentioned the Soviet, so I'll build on that. There was a lot of connectivity in terms of rail and other road infrastructure during the Soviet Union in the region and sort of in the larger region. So is there any attempt by CAREC in the building of these economic corridors to actually build on those kinds of infrastructure that of course have become now old and are not used very much, but is there any attempt at actually reviving them or building on top of them, so to speak, so that that connectivity can be, because it existed and it was very good at that time and so on and so forth. So that's one question. The other question is about conflict in the periphery of Central Asia. Central Asia itself, the 5 towns are not, don't have conflict between each other, but the periphery has a lot of conflict zones, and Caucasus definitely has its own issues. So my question is that it's very nice to see all the quantitative data about the kinds of goods that can travel and all the kinds of connectivities that Dina mentioned. Thank you for that, by the way. But is there some kind of, so this I suppose brings in the knowledge networks as well. Is there any work going on, or is there a feeling for how we can actually think about the knowledge of how we, or build knowledge rather of how we can deal with the conflicts in a more regional way. So I know Uzbekistan does a lot of, has had a lot of initiatives in the last few years trying to deal with Afghanistan and how that impacts the region. So is that something that CAREC would be interested in, or it is interested in, to look at building knowledge to be able to solve some of these problems, which obviously will help with which will help with these. So I think the question can be directed to Dina and Shahbaz maybe. Thank you.
So which one of you want to take it first? Dina? Of course, anyone from the panel.
Okay, I'll start. Thank you very much for your question. And infrastructure, yeah, from Soviet time, it still benefits to connectivity. Why? Because Central Asia is very well connected by rail. But when train comes from People's Republic of China to Kazakhstan, there is a railway called Korgos, very famous, connecting People's Republic of China and Kazakhstan. Train cannot go directly to Kazakhstan because of the what is called gauge, right? The width gauge. It's different, right? Once goods passed from, that's why they need this dry port. It's called dry port. Usually seaport, right? The containers picked up from the ship to land, to a car, let's say trucks, right? But here it's from train to train. So in order to pass that train to go to Kazakhstan, once it's crossed Korgos, Kazakhstan, it can freely move in Central Asia because they're all connected thanks to that infrastructure built in Soviet time, because they're having the same standard for railways.
Thank you.
So that's the problem with infrastructure connectivity. Yeah, when they have different standards, yeah, it's difficult. But I think that's the strength of Central Asia, to have the same common language and having same common infrastructure and even data statistics. So there are many common things. So they can benefit from that. Yeah, but of course, to connect to other regions, a little bit more effort is needed, like this Korgos dry port.
I just wanted to add to that. The problem I think perhaps is those of us who been living in the region from that moment, Soviet moment onwards. So we saw certain, say, counter connectivity developments, meaning that how you could travel from Tashkent to Samarkand normally was you would pass through a bit of Kazakhstan, and that was the fast way. And since it was no international border, it wasn't a problem. So then it was redirected later on to avoid Kazakhstan, so one doesn't have to cross the international border. Similarly, trains going from, say, again, let's say Samarkand to Fergana, Uzbekistan would pass through Tajikistan, and then that again became a problem. So so there was this counter connectivity paradigm that developed basically in 90s, early 2000s, and then in some sense makes things less efficient. The idea is to can we go back to the table and look at what are the most efficient corridors, and not just simply create totally new ones. That's just a reflection on. Yeah.
If I may, Dr. Saxena. So, thanks a lot for the questions. Indeed, I think well answer has been received by from Tina, Dr. Tina, and just quick add to that. For example, many logistics cargo actually from the, let's say, from southern part of Kazakhstan always go to the eastwards and go through the Tashkent region of Uzbekistan to enter the Uzbekistan and further Tajikistan or other connected roads, yeah, or it should go to further to the westwards and towards the RLC area, so the Kyrgyzstan Republic, and through that area, but I don't know to what degree they are really connected. So the Soviet legacy was really good. I mean, in terms of, because we're connected and we still have in use those connections and roads. Yeah. Yet there are many missing links. And one of them was this between these two cities, Kızılorda and now Uchkuduk. So I mean, that could really help to mitigate the road congestion of the Tashkent region. Yeah, and make more utilization of the road in also in terms of we're talking about time, we're talking about costs of the relocation or logistics. Yeah, so this all will be affected. This this is my quick feedback to the first question. Regarding second question, I think we touched upon this question, this aspect, on the first day, particularly by Dr. Akram Umarov, who mentioned a lot about that, because we don't have to go to our Caucasus region, but next to Uzbekistan, Afghanistan is one of the hotspots, yeah, which is really impacting on everything in all economic investments. And one of them, for example, Uzbekistan is building the railroads through Afghanistan to Pakistan into the further ocean. So that was one of the major projects which has been impacted by the current developments in Afghanistan today. And there is no single clear-cut answer for that question, but rather, of course, full engagement in support of all stakeholders in all countries surrounding this area, and also, of course, big countries like including China, Russia, US, and European countries have a role to play in mitigating this impact of this kind of escalations and uncertain future. So could be solved altogether, I think. And yeah, that has definitely a huge impact on overall economic activities CAREC program is doing, and overall ADB. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Now we have two questions from the two co-chairs. We've got Peter. You muted, yeah.
You go first.
No, Professor Nolan, please go ahead.
Okay, after you. I just really want to make just two short observations. The one is the question of infrastructure, which is running a theme that's running throughout this. And of course, China figures very importantly in this. And the question of win-win and the initial signing of the agreement in the picture, the photograph that was presented in one of the presentations with China at the center of it, and the European partners at the other part of this. The question there was the proposition there, and the hope was win-win. And I think there's a danger that we've reached a point where the win-win element is disappearing somewhat, and it's turning into, in certain aspects of the discussion, into a zero-sum confrontation. And I think one of the things that's not sufficiently understood is the relationship of building infrastructure with Chinese entities and with the benefits for Western entities. So while giant Chinese companies build infrastructure, road, rail, MTRs, by the way, mass transit systems, which are incredibly important, high-speed rail, tall buildings, airports, and Chinese SOE, state-owned enterprises, are very good at building these things. But what people lose sight of and don't often understand is that inside most of these construction projects built by Chinese state-owned enterprises are technologies that are frequently supplied by Western companies. And by Western, I include Japanese, Taiwanese, and Korean, certainly American and Europeans. So if you ask a company like Siemens, what are you doing in China? They would say, well, you know, we've got tens of thousands of workers. Our business is growing very fast. And we're inside so much that's going on in China that involves energy efficiency, particularly in the infrastructure sector. So a tall building will have elevators by Otis, energy efficient electricity systems installed by Siemens or Schneider. And of course, most importantly, inside everything is semiconductors. Now, China has a very small place in the global production of semiconductors. So any major project in China built by a state-owned enterprise, in order to be efficient for customers, good in terms of energy efficiency, will have semiconductors and also software, but particularly semiconductors that are imported by American firms, their subsidiaries in East Asia. And not only that, but if Chinese firms are involved in building infrastructure across Central Asia, when it's built, the roads, the airports, the high-speed rail, all these things will involve business for Western companies. So if you build an airport, the main market is going to be for Boeing and Airbus. If you build a road, its main market is going to be Mercedes and VW, Traton, and cars produced by VW and by Toyota and by Ford. So I think the possibilities for win-win are very high. And I think it's the dialogue has become quite polarized, and I think we need to be more aware of the real win-win aspect for Western business and for China and for Central Asia. That's the first point. The second point is the word that was missing from all the discussions is Xinjiang. And Xinjiang's quite big. The headquarters of CAREC is in Urumqi. And it is quite a big area. It has fantastic existing infrastructure in solar and wind. And even what people forget, I mean, Iskandar's a water engineer, I think I'm right, but one of my very close friends, late friend, I'm sure you know, and you could give us a lecture much better than me, as you know very well, the Taklamakan Desert is surrounded, you know where I'm going, it's surrounded by high mountains, and there's a lot of water that comes down. It doesn't disappear. It goes into a huge aquifer under the Taklamakan Desert. And one of my friends was late friend, was an engineer, water engineer, and his idea was you can use wind and solar, it doesn't matter whether it's intermittent, to raise water. And there is a grand scheme for transforming the ecology of Taklamakan back to what it was that Marco Polo allegedly encountered. But certainly the position of Xinjiang, if anybody in China thinks about connectivity, Xinjiang, you can't ignore. And it is a big region, whatever its problems, it's developing. And of course, it has these extraordinary capabilities already being built for solar power and for wind. And of course, the Chinese electricity grid is one of the most reliable in the world, in part because it uses Western technology inside key elements of it. So I think that's something that was missing, and it's not surprising it's missing from this particular discussion, but it's a very important elephant in the room for all this discussion. Those are just my two comments. They're not questions, they're just short observations.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I mean, I would add, this is a question we don't have time to enter now, is that when we look at integration and connectivity, we have the three big elephants in the room: Russia, Iran, and India, which obviously can't be ignored, and indeed Turkey. But I think we have come to the end of our time. However, there is a question by one of our former and perhaps future student, Jin Lu, in the chat. And I think this question may be something that can be addressed by a number of people on the panel. Perhaps I'll ask Iskandar to maybe address that point and maybe invite any other panelists to say so in our concluding moments. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, I think time passed very quickly, and it's now almost 2 hours we are talking and discussion. Still a lot of issues could be discussed, and a lot of things are still open. For the question, people-to-people connectivity, I think although the Belt and Road have launched not early, I mean just recently, a few years ago officially. However, I think Chinese are taking some steps to build up the people-to-people connectivity indeed. For example, I spent some time in Urumqi, and I had a few universities visited, and I gathered some students from Central Asia. At least in one of the party, I got 25 students from Uzbekistan. In Urumqi. And I know there's a special programs, grants programs for many universities around China where Central Asians are traveling, start to study. I can't say that it's almost equal to the number of students who are living from Central Asia to US or Europe, but still it's growing in numbers. And prestigious studying in China is getting more and more young people are learning Chinese. So I think this is, I would say, it's not incidental. It's not just because people like it, but I think there is some specific programs developed by Chinese. I assume it's not maybe within Belt and Road, but within some policy towards Central Asia and neighbors. So I think this is the good way, but still it is scattered. It's not coordinated, but it's becoming more structured. So in embassies of China in Central Asia, where I travel a lot, I see a lot of young people standing in queues to waiting for student visa. So I think that's one very important point. I would say it is like an emerging trend. Second one, joint research. I saw the Academy of Science of China, for example, on Aral Sea and water issues, where I'm an expert. I saw at least 2 largest programs, one from Academy of Science, one from industrial parks of China, to opening up calls for joint research proposals, Chinese and Central Asian universities. And many researchers from Central Asia are spending time in China to do joint experiments. I saw before the COVID-19, quite huge delegations of Chinese researchers coming to Central Asia to conduct a lot of research on climate, water issues, desertification, biodiversity, renewable energy. I saw this is also like an emerging second trend, which I can say this is like a joint research. And last but not least, it is about joint publication. Firstly, of course, Chinese have boomed up a number of publications in international journals. Now I see more and more Central Asian and Chinese researchers publishing together in international journals. That's also a new trend which I can observe. These are our opportunities. What are the challenges? I think first challenge we see that as a normal to any thing is different standards. Of course, Chinese standards and Central Asian standards differ, not only on roads, also on knowledge, even sometimes in methodology. So I think this is one thing you face in China. Language. Of course, people are learning Chinese, but most of the programs are announced in English, and you face quite a big challenge living there, not knowing Chinese. I think you have to learn Chinese if you would like to study in China. I think this is second thing. And the last maybe thing is that for a long time, Central Asia have been divided from China. It is, and the Soviet Union, for some time, at least in my age, people have been always had some fears toward China. It's built in. And sometimes some groups are using it, I mean, anti-Chinese sentiment. So people are not really yet overcome this feeling of having great China sitting just nearby is danger. I think this is third thing which I think everyone's inside. But as we go back to today's thing is connectivity. More and more young people connected and different means, not only physically, but via different means, digitally, learning together, being classmates if they study together. So I think this is opening up. I think connectivity brings people together. I hope today's discussion also brings at least one step forward to learn not only about trade connectivity, which is great, also knowledge connectivity, people-to-people connectivity. I think these are needed. We witnessed it in the COVID-19. How much important that we can bring knowledge together to overcome these challenges, which is great to one country or even for one region. If we cannot get together to overcome these difficulty is we will lose staying alone. I think that's a message from the COVID-19 lesson. I will stop here, Dr. Saxena, and thank you, Professor Nolan, and you for today's good session.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. As we hope this is a beginning of a relationship, and I can't help not pose a question which has been sent, and this is not to be answered, just to be left for us to think about the future. In the chat directly to me, this question is actually posed to me, Ghulam and Shahbaz. The question is that while India and Pakistan supply global technical labor, professors, students, and all variety of trained people, how come Central Asia seems to not engage with that paradigm? It's a paper to write on itself because the question of language, many other things are not so problematic. There are other easy ways which are simply not exploited. So anyway, this is the question for the next roundtable that we will have. Peter, would you like to say a closing word?
I think it's been an extremely rewarding session, and thank you very much for their contribution. It's been most worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for now. We have 2 more sessions after lunch. We're taking 50-minute lunch break. So people on Zoom, please notify